Ghost Hunting in New England,
your favorite spooky podcast. Hello and happy Wednesday. Welcome to Ghost Hunting in New England with your hosts Amelia
and Beth.
And today we are talking about something so cool.
Unlike every other week.
This week it's extra cool because we're extra close to Halloween. Do you want to tell them what we're talking about?
Yes. We are talking about shadow people.
Ooh.
And even though Amelia and I had a long talk about this before we started recording, that neither one of us believes that shadow people are ghosts.
No.
But we both believe that they are spooky.
Yes.
And scary. And definitely worth talking about.
They're in the ballpark of ghosts.
Yeah, I mean, they're not totally like out of it's not aliens. It's not Bigfoot.
Well, it's not Bigfoot.
All right, it's not Bigfoot. It's not Loch Ness Monster.
It's not Bigfoot. It might be aliens. I don't know. Okay, so do you have anything else before we start?
No, I think we should get right to it.
All right, here we go. So, what's a shadow person? A shadow person, also known as a shadow figure, shadow being, or black mass, is the perception of a patch of shadow as a living humanoid figure, particularly as interpreted by believers in the paranormal or supernatural as the presence of a spirit or entity. A number of religions, legends, and belief systems describe shadowy spiritual beings or supernatural entities, such as shades of the underworld. And various shadowy creatures have long been a staple of folklore and ghost stories. An excerpt from shadowpeople.dotster.com describes them as the mere silhouette of a person, usually male, but generally lacking in any other characteristics of gender. However, in no way does the description end there. There are hatted shadowed beings, hooded shadows, cloaked ones, or solid wispy smoke types. Some are seen only from the waist up. Others clearly have legs and are seen fleeing from their observers. They dart into corners, through walls, into closets, or behind television sets, bushes, and buildings. Sometimes they simply fade into dark recesses of the night. Lacking in description is one common denominator unifying the many different types of shadow people that enter our world, except that they are intensely dark. Even then, there are exceptions. The Coast to Coast AM late-night radio show helped popularize modern beliefs in shadow people beginning on April 12, 2001, when host Art Bell, my guy, interviewed Native American elder Thunder Strikes, who is also known as Harley Swifter Regan. Later that year, in October of 2001, renowned paranormal author Heidi Hollis published her first book on the topic of shadow people, which skyrocketed her into being one of the most prominent experts on shadow people in the paranormal community. Hollis describes shadow people as dark silhouettes with human shapes and profiles that flicker in and out of peripheral vision, and claims that people have reported the figures attempting to jump into their chest and choke them. She believes the figures to be negative alien beings that can be repelled by various means, including invoking the name of Jesus. Although seers describe them as menacing, other believers and paranormal authors do not always agree whether shadow people are evil, helpful, or neutral. And some even speculate that shadow people may be the extra-dimensional inhabitants of another universe. Some paranormal investigators and authors, such as Chad Stambog, claim to have recorded images of shadow people on video. Rosemary Ellen Gully, who has published over 50 books on a wide range of paranormal, spiritual, and mystical topics, and heads Visionary Living Incorporated, identifies shadow people as a category of creatures called the jinn. In an interview with Psychology Today about Gully's book, The Jinn Connection, an interviewer asked, "You are known for books about angels, demons, vampires, witches, and the like. What drew you to the jinn subject?" She responded, "There were two major avenues, both involving shadow people. Dark and menacing humanoids I had been researching since 2004. I already knew a bit about the jinn from earlier research in demonology. I noticed that many cases of persistent negative hauntings involved shadow people, so I began probing for their true identity. I discovered that many shadow people experiencers are also extraterrestrial experiencers." What?
What's an experiencer?
Whoops. Extraterrestrial experiencers, especially abductees. Through a long process, I concluded that shadow people are a shape-shifted form taken by the jinn. Therefore, there is a profound connection between jinn and bad hauntings and extraterrestrial abductions. Furthermore, the footprints of the jinn are evident throughout our mythologies about ancient aliens and gods. The picture that emerged is of a major jinn involvement in all of our entity contact experiences throughout history. Ooh.
I love ancient aliens. I love that wicked Greek guy who he's always like orangely tan and he's so excited about everything that he's talking about. And he's 100% convinced that every single thing that he's telling you is 100% proof of aliens.
God bless him.
And it doesn't matter what the topic of the show is that week. He's always convinced. I love that guy.
I love his memes. Okay. Several psychological and physiological conditions can account for reported experiences of shadowy shapes seeming alive. A sleep paralysis sufferer may perceive a shadowy or indistinct shape approaching them while they lie awake paralyzed and become increasingly alarmed. A person experiencing heightened emotions, such as while walking alone on a dark night, may incorrectly perceive a patch of shadow as an attacker. Many methamphetamine addicts report the appearance of shadow people after prolonged periods of sleep deprivation. Psychiatrist Jack Potts suggests that methamphetamine usage adds a conspiritual component to the sleep deprivation hallucinations. One interviewed subject said that you don't see shadow dogs or shadow birds or shadowed cats. You see shadow people, staying in doorways, walking behind you, coming at you from the sidewalk. These hallucinations have been directly compared to the paranormal entities described in folklore. And that's our introduction to shadow people.
I like it. That really covered a lot of stuff.
That's why we have listeners. We go in depth, baby.
I know, but that was such a good introduction that really touched on a lot of the different things that we're going to talk about tonight. Yeah?
Yes.
Good job.
Thanks so much.
What is that phenomena called where we try to make a person out of all the faces? Pareidolia?
I'm not good with big words, but you're close.
You know what I mean, though, right?
I know exactly what you mean.
Pareidolia.
Yes.
Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
Okay. So I think that there is a certain amount that goes on with shadow people that does come back to pareidolia. When you're walking alone down a street late at night and, you know, maybe you had a one or a two or maybe too many and you're a little tipsy going along, and you see a shadow. Yes, your brain is automatically going to try to make a person out of whatever that thing is that we see.
So as a really paranoid person, I can say I don't need any drinks. And if I am walking alone at night, I'm clutching my mace as I walk, thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's someone behind that tree, but there isn't. It's just the shadow of the tree.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Just so long as we're clear that you're not actually in any danger.
Not usually.
All right. But you have your mace just in case.
Always.
So I think that most people, when they think of shadow people, the first thing that comes to mind these days is actually Slender Man. Would you agree?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So with the history of Slender Man, for those of you out there who aren't familiar with it, in a nutshell, some guy created this fake...
Creepypasta.
Is that the guy's name?
No, it's called a creepypasta. It's an internet forum for people to write strange stories.
Okay. So some guy created a creepypasta
Yep.
about this shadow figure,
Yep.
and he called it Slender Man.
Yep.
And other people got all interested and excited about it, and these girls out, where were they, like Minnesota, Montana?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay. I feel like they were somewhere like the northern Midwest. They took it too far, and they actually killed someone.
Yep.
And blamed it on Slender Man, this made-up shadow person.
Correct.
Okay. So with that in mind, Amelia and I are going to tell you a bunch of stories tonight that are supposedly first-hand accounts from people who have had various encounters with shadow people. And we have culled them from the internet, and we are making no guarantees about their authenticity or anything behind it, just saying that we found you a bunch of stories that people are saying about encounters they had with shadow people.
Yeah, so if you decide to kill someone, that's on you.
Yeah, don't kill
that's
anybody.
on you. Yeah, if you think you're being possessed, just call someone.
All right. So as Amelia said in the opening, shadow people have a long history of mythology and lore behind them. The ancient Egyptians, way back when, they actually believed that the shadow was one of 7 souls that a person has. And that the shadow was called the Sheut, Sheut. And it was like a small human. It was depicted in pictures as a small human that was attached to the regular sized human. And so it became associated with the idea of death because they also drew dead people as little black figures. So there was this idea that you couldn't have a person without a shadow, and you couldn't have a shadow without a person. So slowly...
How do they describe trees? Like trees have shadows.
I don't think that they have trees in Egypt.
Yeah, that's fair. Pyramids. Cats.
Well, they definitely have cats in Egypt. They all have a shadow while they're alive.
A pyramid doesn't.
Well, but a pyramid has souls within it.
Yeah, that's fair. A wagon.
And it's also that the pyramid's shadow doesn't look like a person.
Yeah, that's fair too.
Just saying.
I'm just playing the devil's advocate.
That's okay. So moving from ancient Egypt across to ancient Greece, people actually dedicated their shadow to Zeus, and it was considered to be a marvelous sacrifice. Until then later, it wasn't such a marvelous sacrifice because you need your shadow. And people would go... You're doing the eyebrow furrowing thing. What's going on over there?
They're not furrowing that much.
Well, no, the Botox is fine. You're just making the...
That's Sorry. Yeah, I'm just thinking. I'm considering my thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
People would go to the temple of Zeus Lysias, and they lost their shadow. Lysias was also traditionally believed to be the origin of werewolves.
Nice.
So the idea that a werewolf doesn't have a shadow, right? And if you don't have a shadow, you don't have a soul. Right?
Vampires don't have shadows.
We'll get to that.
Great.
All right. So even though the Greeks had a different god of shadows, it was Erebus, the god of the underworld, the shadow that a person had was considered separate from the god of the shadow. I was really kind of confused about the Greeks' idea about a shadow. But the Romans, because the Romans stole all sorts of stuff just because they thought it was fun, the Romans called your shadow your umbra, and it was called the shade. And it belonged underground and in the underworld, and it's where a person's shadow went after death. So any shadows that you saw unattached to people, i.e. shadow people, would have to be some sort of dead presence. So the Romans were kind of on board with shadow people being ghosts, that they were the remains of a dead person.
But like the negative remains, right?
Yes. So all dead people were negative at that point. Romans, like if you went to the underworld, you were not a god. And the gods would have been the only people who were positive ghosts. Does that make sense? So
no.
So the Greeks and the Romans had this idea of if you were a good person, very similar to our idea of heaven now, but you would go through this transformation of, it's some really fancy fun word, and I can't come up with it right now, but basically you were turned into a star.
Oh, I like that.
So apothekariosis, something like that. But that's not it at all.
Sounds like a makeup company.
I'll come up with it before the end of the episode. So if your soul went to the underworld, that's where all like the regular people went. So it was only people that were like Julius Caesar.
I think we're all stars.
Of course you do.
I'm in the vortex.
In medieval times, it was believed that werewolves, vampires, and witches all lacked a shadow. And there were all sorts of hunts that went on for all of these different beings at different times in the Middle Ages. And they all lacked a shadow, so they all lacked a soul. So you can see this kind of idea carrying through all the way from the ancient Egyptians through the Greeks and the Romans. And I did find a little bit on the Norse mythology. As a history teacher, it pains me that we don't teach Norse mythology